Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Jessie, and welcome back to another episode of Rewire To Inspire. The show where we'll dive into self-love, learn tangible ways to rewire the brain, and discovering your soul's purpose. The goal of Rewire To Inspire is to encourage listeners to begin doing the hard work, to get curious and open to maximizing your life. Our mindset shapes how we live. Depending on life events, traumas, and personal experiences, our mindsets are all vastly different. However, one thing we all have in common is the ability to rewire our mind, to change the narrative, and to pivot our lives. I hope you leave each episode with the belief that you are so worthy to live a life true to you. I look forward to chatting with you every single Tuesday and Thursday and helping you grow exponentially in all areas of your life. Without further ado, here's today's episode. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to my podcast, Rewire To Inspire. I am your host, Jessie Brown, and I am so excited to be jumping on the microphone with you all for episode number 124. If you missed Tuesday's episode, I definitely encourage you guys to check out that episode. It was all about 4 ways that we can stop overthinking. It was definitely a powerful episode, and I think can benefit really anybody. I think so many of us struggle with overthinking and dealing with that catastrophizing thoughts and buying into thoughts and not buying into them. And so if you're interested in that, I definitely encourage you to check that out. For today's episode, today is one that is very near and dear to my heart and something that I definitely recognize is part of my unique genius zone. And I truly believe is a part of why I am here. And so I want to share with you guys 5 facts about trauma that you might not know and that you might need to hear. So I really wanted to share with you guys very vulnerably and openly and just from my experiences and my learnings and things I've studied and the transparency of what it is that I've learned, because I never realized. It's almost like when you know something so well or you are so familiar with it, you just assume everybody knows as well. We all have this. However, the thing is I recognize that I have to reflect back, and even 5 years ago, I didn't know any of this. So I'm presupposing that everybody knows all this information when in fact they don't. And so I am trying to provide education and psychoeducation around a subject that I am super passionate about. And it's something that unfortunately a lot of us deal with and have dealt with, which is experiencing a traumatic event. And so I really wanted to share with you guys that my biggest help in healing my trauma was to understand how it was affecting my brain and my body. We can't tend to something and heal something that we don't understand. And unfortunately, so many of us don't understand trauma. And there's a lot of misconception, and a lot of us aren't trauma aware and trauma informed and have an understanding of how it hijacks the body and how it affects our life and how it affects our development and all those things. And so I'm going to keep today's episode very surface level of the top 5 things that I thought of that had I known these in high school or a little bit after that in college, I would have maybe been a little less hard on myself. Because the thing is I just thought that all these things I was experiencing were only happening to me. I thought that I was the only one in the whole wide world who felt the pain the way that I did and who hurt the way that I did and who was feeling the things that I was feeling and not feeling the things that I was feeling, because I'm someone who's struggled with dissociation pretty much as long as I can remember. So dissociation also, again, see, even just assuming you guys know what that means. Dissociation is basically when our physical environment becomes too much for our body and our mind. And so it almost just like turns it off. It just takes us away. And so a lot of my life was spent inside my head, but in a way that was really narrative. And so it zoned out the external world. And so I've struggled for a long time with naming my emotions, with being able to communicate with my emotions, with being able to cry, with not shutting down in stressful, overwhelming situations. And so that's something that, had I understood, was a symptom and, something that comes out of trauma, I would have maybe been a little less hard on myself and I might have seen the world in a different lens. But nonetheless, it is never too late to learn these things. It is never too late to have the permission to know that you're not alone and that these things affect so many of us across the globe. And without having that, it can be really, really lonely and an isolating feeling to have. And so I wanted to share with you guys that I'm sure you guys know, if you've tuned in before, that I spent 2 years as a counselor at a sexual assault healing center. And this was really the first time that I started to learn about trauma. I learned a little bit about it when I was studying social work, but not to the extent in which I think, looking back now, we needed to learn. I think we did in some ways, but not really directly, which is interesting because so much of social work, 90% of social work, in my opinion, is going to be dealing with folks that have experienced trauma, maybe even 95%, maybe even 100%. I don't know. And so when I started that job, they told me, you're going to be educating clients on something called psychoeducation. I was like, okay, what does that mean? Basically, it's providing education about how trauma affects the brain and the body. Or basically educating what it does to the body, what it does to the mind, tips and tricks to help with that, grounding techniques, providing tools, providing coping strategies, all those things. And so when my clients began to understand and I was able to communicate with them through my learnings what was likely happening to their body and their brain, I just remember so many of them just said, thank you. And I could see instant relief in their face, in their bodies, in their beings, because for the first time, I think, ever in their life, they felt understood. They felt like somebody had compassion. They felt not alone. They felt like what they were experiencing wasn't just unique to them, but that other people deal with this too. And so I really became obsessed with learning as much as I could about how trauma lives in the body, in the mind. And one of my favorite books is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, because it's all about that. It's all about how trauma lies in the body. And I think that this is recently, more than ever in society, being studied and being practiced, because so many of us are quote unquote traumatized, but for so long that was just viewed as something war veterans dealt with. And so yes, of course, war veterans dealt with PTSD and so many other horrific things I can't even imagine, but also with having the understanding that even having an up and down childhood, having emotional abuse, having if you were bullied in school, whatever, can also traumatize us. And so I think without that permission and knowing, we can begin to almost become angry at our own bodies and minds, because we're like, why are you responding this way? Why are you acting this way? Why are you doing this? Why am I like this? And then we start to self-deprecate and self-harm ourselves. And so my goal of today is to educate you on these 5 things about trauma that you may not know or understand, very surface level. I'm keeping this very, very surface level today. And I want to write a blog in the next coming months about all of these in more in-depth, perspective. So if you're interested in that, definitely stay tuned, because I want to get more into writing. My goal is to be an author in the next 5 years. And so I know that I want it to be a trauma-informed book. And so without further ado, let's talk about these 5 things. So the first one, and you guys might already know this, but maybe not the extent to which, they live in our body. And so the first one is that we have 4 survival mechanisms: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And so I had just assumed everybody knew what those were, and I can't really remember when I learned them. And so I could be very naive in that I might have only learned these a couple years ago. But for anybody who has never heard those terms before, basically what happens is we have our homeostasis state. We have our chill, our rest and digest, our parasympathetic state. That is basically when we are just being, we are in our body, we are safe, we are calm. We have this part of our brain called the amygdala, and it is basically our brain's alarm system. And its job is to scan our environment, everything around us, very quickly, so that it can respond if there is a potential threat. And so if you think like an alarm at a fire department, if they get called in, that is basically what goes off in our brain if our mind if that amygdala picks up a potential threat. That can be any type of threat. That can be something we see, something we hear, something we touch, something we taste, something we smell. Our mind is constantly on alert looking for things. When this goes off, when this bell goes off, a ton of cortisol is sent throughout our body, our adrenaline goes up, and we are basically put into a state of survival. So fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Really, my second point is kind of going off the first one, and that's that we do not choose which one we are going to go into. We don't have the conscious ability to choose if we're going to fight, if we're going to flight, if we're going to freeze, if we're going to fawn. And so as our amygdala is activated, our prefrontal cortex is turned offline. And what our prefrontal cortex's main job is to give us rational, logical thinking. And so you can imagine when that amygdala goes off and our logic thinking goes off, it's like, who's driving? Who's driving this show? It's our survival mechanisms. And so reflecting back, I guess, a couple years ago, my parents were in Fort McMurray when they had their wildfire. Extremely traumatic event, affected an insane amount of families, took away families' houses and personal items, things they can never get back, and was just a horrific experience for way too many people. I remember hearing stories after, when I moved there, of people being like, there was a fire 50 yards from my house and I was grabbing a toaster. I remember my mom told me that my dad took a shower when they could literally see flames from their door. And in the moment, we're like, what are you doing? Like, after, it's like, whoa, what was going through your mind? It's like, that's the thing that we have to give ourselves permission for. And the point that I'm trying to make is that once that's activated, we are basically robots in a way, in that we don't really have a lot of control over what's happening, especially in those moments. We have a lot of adrenaline happening and we're not really in our bodies per se. Our body responds in all types of ways, and basically all it is trying to do is keep you alive, keep you safe, get you to that next thing. But knowing that we do not choose which one is activated is a very, very helpful thing to know, especially if you have been a victim of something. I remember I had a lot of sexual assault survivors, clients come to me. And they would say, Jessie, I don't understand why I stayed. Why didn't I fight? This makes me emotional to talk about. So if I'm stagnant a little bit between my words, it brings a flood of emotions up for me to talk about this. And so being able to communicate with them, you did not choose to do that. Your body chose what it needed to do to keep you safe. And the fact that you're in front of me right now tells me that something worked. And I remember just witnessing this one client, that's who's on my mind right now, making me a little emotional, of course, is I just remember them saying, thank you so much for saying that. I needed to hear that years ago, and I was never told that. Her friends had told her, basically blaming her for staying, blaming her for not doing X, Y, and Z. And so I think we need to know, and that's why this point is so near and dear to my heart, is that we do not choose which state is activated. And we can flip between them. We can start by fighting, and if that doesn't work, we can jump into fawn, right? So fawn is basically, I guess I should have described them for you guys. Freeze is basically when we shut down, right? We're shutting down, or we're kind of going into that shell a little bit. Fight would be physically fighting back, that adrenaline's pumping, that cortisol's pumping, we're getting ready to fight. Flee would obviously be fleeing the situation, running away from the situation, or even mentally running away from the situation. And fawn is almost like you're complying with whatever's happening in the hopes that you can get out of it, right? So we see this a lot in kidnapping situations and anything like that, where we fawn of saying, we're going to do whatever it is you want, just don't hurt me, just don't whatever. That is what fawn is. And so I think I lost my original point to why I was sharing that with you guys, but oh yes, we can flip between them. So we can start by fighting and then end up going into fawn if fighting isn't working, and then we can end up going into a freeze state. And so just know that we can kind of switch between all of them very quickly, very simultaneously. It can happen super quick. And so that is the second point, is that we do not choose which one of these survival mechanisms is going to be activated. Our body chooses that for us. And in a way, if you are here today, even if you have a horrific experience, and if you do and you're listening, I just want to say I'm so sorry if anything has ever happened to you. And furthermore than that, I'm sorry anybody has ever guilted you or shamed you or not believed you or told you you should have done something different or you could have done something different, I just want you to know that that's BS. And your experience is enough to not have everything else on top of that. And so I'm so sorry if you are listening and you are someone who has dealt with that. I definitely want you to know that my heart is with you and you are not alone. And so today's a bit of a harder episode, you guys, but I think that if we're not willing to talk about these things, what good is that going to serve? If we're not willing to have open conversations about this stuff, we're not going to heal, and we're not going to spread awareness, and we're not going to be able to come to a safer place as a society with all these misconceptions. Okay. And so I know today's a little bit of a harder episode. So I encourage us all to take a deep breath. And we're going to keep going, and we're learning, and we're evolving together. And so number 3, these points are really kind of all jumbled together, and I'm kind of jumping back and forth. So 3 is kind of what I said in 2 and 1, but you did what you thought was best at the time. I remember having so many domestic violence survivor women come in and speak. And a large thing that they would say is, I don't understand why I stayed. I don't understand why I went back. I don't understand why I believed him. I don't understand why blah, 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 right? You did what you thought was best at the time. This is something that I think we can all give ourselves grace for from experiences from childhood. We did what we thought was best. In any situation that you're reflecting back now and you're like, why did I do that? My answer is still, you're here in front of me, so something worked. You're able to tell me the story, something worked. You did what you thought was best at the time. Think of a decision that you made in the past. A bad decision, maybe something you did in high school or in college. And looking back now, you're like, oh my God, I would never do that again. I can think of several examples of things that I would never do again that I did. But the thing is at the time, that's all I knew. And so 24-year-old me can't beat up 14-year-old me or 15, whatever, for doing something when at the time it's like, that's all I knew. And so it doesn't serve any good for me now to sit here and catastrophize and beat my old self up. It's like, no, I did what I thought was best at that time. Where is it in your life that you maybe need to give yourself that permission? Where is it that you did everything that you thought was best in a time that now reflecting back, you're like, it doesn't sit comfortably with me? How can you give yourself and work on giving yourself that permission? Number 4, this is one that I really want to go into in my blog and in my book, is that you can heal trauma. You can heal it. I want to preface though, in that you will likely always have memories of the trauma. But physiologically, we can get it out of our body. The intensity of it can lessen. The association, the strong association of memories can lessen. Our response and our resilience to how it affects us can lessen. I think there's a lot of misconceptions that we can't heal trauma. And I think that that's because for so long, we didn't think it was possible. And so I never want to say that we can heal it, and the fact that it's going to like completely go away, we're going to cure it, it doesn't exist anymore. No. We can work on it. We can tend to it. We can love on it. We can educate it. We can do the work. We can bring awareness to it. And slowly over time, we can heal it. I know this to be true because I've done it for myself and I'm doing it for myself. There is so many experiences in my life that at one point I thought they were going to be my reality forever. But seeing a proper therapist, doing the work myself, educating myself, I am so proud to sit here and say that it can get better. It can and will get better, but it takes time. And working with somebody who can support you on that journey, I never could have done it without my therapist. Don't do it alone. Don't feel like you have to do it alone. I know we can have a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and all the things pertaining to telling somebody our story or getting help, but that's what they're there for. You know, that's what they went to school to study, is to help people. is to tend to trauma, is to heal it. And so I just want you guys to know that you can heal it, but you can't do it by yourself. It's really, really important that we have that safe person, depending on what our experiences are, right? We have like waves and spectrums of trauma and what it is that we've gone through. So what care you need might be different than me, might be different than my friend, right? And so find what's unique to you, but know and have the permission right now in your heart, in your mind, whatever it is that you're struggling with, you can heal it, you can tend to it. And I promise you, it can and will get better over time if you do the work, the hard work, because it's not fun and it's not easy, but you will thank yourself more for doing it than for allowing it to sit in your body and, in a way, take away the joy and beauty of life. The last point, number 5, your childhood shaped so much of your perception of the world, and it takes conscious work to rewire it, but it is so possible. So another huge, I guess, fact about trauma is that so many things about us were developed between the age of 0 and 5. We're reading a book right now in book club called How Emotions Are Made. It's by Lisa. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to look it up now, you guys, to tell you, because I can't remember. And I can't not tell you the author's name. How Emotions Are Made by, just opening up Amazon here, by Lisa Barrett, I believe is how it's pronounced. And so it's a really, really great book. It is so far. And so in that book, though, it's basically sharing how a lot of our emotions are made at that time, right? Our memory, our association, how we respond to things, our resilience to things, our encoded response to certain stimuli and situations. And so knowing that our childhood did shape a lot of our perception of the world, but it's not in concrete, which I think is the misconception. Yes, fundamentally, a lot of those things were hardwired in me at that age, but now that I'm older, I'm conscious, and if I do the work every day to notice and to rewire, you're dang right, I have the ability and the control to change that. And so that is a point that I don't think a lot of us believe, because we're just told that who we are is who we are and what we know is what we know. And I think that that's because the generation before us strongly had that belief, which rightfully so. They didn't have any other evidence to prove otherwise. So why would you think differently? However, I do think that these next generations are realizing how untrue that is, and actually how hurtful that is to have those thoughts. And so that is my 5th and final point, is that yes, childhood does shape a lot of how we view the world, but we can change that with conscious effort and energy. And again, especially working with someone who's trauma informed, maybe doing some inner child work. And I have a few podcasts about inner child work on this channel. So if you're interested in those, I definitely encourage you to check them out. But anyway, you guys, that is all I had for my 5 facts or myths, whatever, about trauma. I want you guys to just take a moment, because I noticed myself kind of coming in and out of dissociation, even just on this episode. I have so much grace and gratitude in my heart for just our world and all of our experiences and all of our pain. And no pain is different than the other, because if your pain hurts you and it's a 10 and my pain hurts me and it's a 2 on a global scale, frig that. Whatever it is you feel is your experience, and don't let anybody tell you or lessen that. So many of my clients that I worked with that were roughly college years age, so they were pretty close to my age, would just say, my friends don't believe me. I want you to know that I believe you. I want you to know that there's people that will believe you. And you don't need their belief to make your experience or your story true. That is your story, that is your experience, and nobody can take that away from you. And I'm sorry if nobody's ever given you that permission and that space and that love that you deserve. Okay, and so this is definitely a subject that rattles me up, which is how I know it's a part of my purpose and a part of my mission. So if you are looking for someone to speak with about this, I definitely encourage you to contact, a therapist or a counselor that is trauma informed in your area. If you are looking for support with even doing that, or you're looking to connect, I have a link below to book a free 30-minute call. I would love to chat with you, see how I can support you, see how I can support you with starting that journey. And I just want you guys to know you're not alone. I love you guys so much, and I'm so grateful for each and every one of you for tuning in every week. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. It was a little bit of a harder one, so if it poked anything within you, I definitely encourage you to just take a couple minutes to tend to yourself and notice that, and notice what that means for you and what that means about the world. Okay, and so much love, you guys. I look forward to chatting with you all next week. Bye, you guys. Thank you all so much for tuning into today's episode of Rewire to Inspire. I absolutely love connecting with you all, so make sure you're following me on Instagram. I am at Jessie Brown 13. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to leave a review or share with someone you think would enjoy. I look forward to chatting with you all next episode. And remember, get out of your head and into your heart.